So welcome, and I'd just like to welcome all our other friends, and good morning to the Australian contingent, and good evening to the Canadian contingent, which I know there's a few Canadians online. My name's Peter Thurn, and I'm from DataGene, and I'm today with Kevin Jones from Shady Glen Farms and Ian VandenBerg from Genex in Canada. So welcome, guys. I hope we have a nice 45 minutes or so of discussion that everyone can benefit from. So just some rules or some housekeeping. If anyone listening in has a question along the way, if they could pop it in the chat, and I'll try and weave it in at hopefully at the relevant time, or we can cover them off at the end if we've got time. So I might kick off with Kevin. Kev, do you want to give us a bit of a brief introduction to yourself, where you're situated, and a little bit about what the current farm looks like?
Okay, yeah, sure. No, and thanks for having us on. I really enjoyed your last couple of webinars. They're really insightful, and yeah, big shoes to fill, I guess. But we're a little bit more of an average farm for Canada here. We're in the town of Midland, closer to Midland, so which is a couple hours north of Toronto. I guess you got a map there, which is nice. That gives a visual. We are in a valley that's called Hog Valley, and so this farm, a lot of the farms that we run is needing like tile drainage. So we put underground pipe in there, and so it originally is wetter, and then with the pipe it drains it nicely so that we have good farmable, arable land, and it's a bit of a sandy loam soil mostly. Yeah, so my brother and I, Steve and myself, are the main operators of Shady Glen Farms. We lost our partner and dad a couple years ago, but we're continuing on. We also have, so Steve's wife Yvonne is involved, and my wife Carolyn as well. We are 5th generation on the in the valley. I think that was about 1876 when the home farm was established, and yeah, mom and dad started milking cows seriously in the 70s. My mom is also worked as a nurse, and before that my grandparents on my maternal side, they were milking cows, milking jerseys since the 50s. We have influence from I've got 2 uncles on the Simpson side, on my mom's side, that were Jersey farmers as well. And so a lot of influence from those 2 as well. And as well as from both our wives' side. My wife is from a Holstein herd just south of between here and Toronto, and Yvonne is also from a Holstein herd that has half turned into jerseys at this point now in London. We have Steve and I. We both have 4 kids each as well. They range from university age down to a 5-year-old of mine. This picture that you're looking at is a few years old, but so that little baby in my arms is now 5 and skating at the hockey rink. So time goes on. What else?
Who's the famous person on the right-hand side of the photo? Is it? Yes,
I've got that. It's noted here. I meant to mention that, but yeah, many of you might know her sister Michelle, and Michelle Axford now, but Michelle Jones. She left for New Zealand and then Australia in 1996 when I was younger, 15, I guess. So I remember taking her to the airport, and it wasn't a happy day, but it's been great having her influence around too. and the chats that we've had over the years between us and her husband Mike, and just comparing, any of the friends that she sent us to. We've made a nice few connections and had hosted visitors in our at our place from her connections, and it's been nice, that dialogue between Australia and Canada, and really everybody's doing the best we can, and there's some differences between how everybody does things. There's no way we could pasture our cows like you guys do. We are frozen at the moment, and we have been for about 4 months, so a lot of our year is under snow, so there's a couple of challenges to that. So other backgrounds, yeah, we all did 4-H, and we're able to learn how to take care of cattle, and we showed cattle at the fairs and got interested in marketing and so on of cattle, genetics and breeding and so on. We went to Steve and I both, and Michelle as well, went to the University of Guelph, which is a couple hours away. And through those connections, the roommates and the friends we made down there, like there's been a lot of networking and so on for our farms, and really kind of fueled the interest of coming back and wanting to farm ourselves. The farm that you're looking at right now is where we currently milk the cows. Carol and I bought this particular farm in 2007 when we got married, and you can't quite see it in the picture, but right behind it, so we're concession to concession. Steve and Yvonne, my brother, sister-in-law, they had bought their farm 2003. You can't, in the far distance is the home farm, which is about 2 concessions over, two miles over. And so we were milking there up until 2010 when we built this barn. Currently it's we milk about 110 cows and 2 robots in that barn. You can also see the solar panels that are on the rooftop. That happened in 2016, I think, 2014, sometime back then. We put an addition on and put rooftop solar panels on. And then we grew to about 900 acres of field crops. Obviously not all for the 100 cows. So we grow extra corn, soybeans, wheat, sometimes edible beans. The kids have sweet corn, and we have at Steve and Yvonne's, we have pumpkins for sale at the kids. Kids take care of themselves. So and another note for our system, like in Canada, we have supply management system. So our growth is quite expensive and small, and comes in small chunks. We have to buy quota or market share still. And so our growth probably when I came out of university was probably aiming more like, 500 cows or something like that. Dad milked 40 cows. And so we have been continually buying quota and trying to expand, but so far we've gotten to about 110. So I don't know what else for a intro is.
Oh, that's probably pretty good. Just how many? So there's you and Steve on the farm.
Yeah.
Any other labour you utilise apart from the child labour?
Yeah. Aside from the child labour, we do require some part-time help through some busy times for sure. Last spring, we pretty much, up until June anyways, it was just my brother and I, and it did really help through COVID when the older of Steve's kids were home kind of for school anyways, so they were a big help, and someone you can trust to go to the barn while you're still in the field. So that was helpful. Really for the last 2 years it's been like that. And in the fall we do hire somebody. We had someone full-time last summer. So long story short, we should have another person probably, and not be quite so long in the field or in the barn, but we just haven't quite found the right person yet.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So we've never done a two-man show. These have all been one-on-one interviews. So this is I'm going to try and juggle this. So we'll maybe get Ian. Oh well, before we move on, Kevin, what's going on here?
Claire's doing the splits. She's our gymnast.
Which one's Gretzky?
Let's say they're all Gretzky, right? Is that the right answer?
I think
actually the one
so.
fella, the bigger guy there is he's a neighbor, and his brother's actually in the OHL now, which is cool. So yeah, there's potential out here. But Clara there doing the splits. We want her to play hockey because we've got all the kids in hockey, but she wants to be a gymnast, and she's So this is what our place looks. Well, it doesn't look like now because the snowpack is melting. It was plus 10 or plus 5 today, but a week ago it looked like this, and it's kind of pretty neat. They were able to do their COVID online schooling over the last couple of years, and through recess they'd throw their skates on and go out for a skate. So we're lucky that way. We were able to make good outdoor rinks the last couple of years.
But it obviously doesn't look like that all the time.
No, we get that's our sweet corn patch actually. So it grows the area, like we have a good, pretty decent rainfall. We don't have too many drought times, so it's consistent. It's pretty moderate climate. We have a lot of plus 30 degrees Celsius days through the summer. So our corn grows fairly well. Something in the neighborhood of 4 ton an acre of dry corn. Silage is somewhere between 20 and 30 tons, depending on variety. We actually grow on a side note, we grow a brown midrib variety, which doesn't have a lot of volume to it, but so it's a good growing area once the sun does come out.
Very good. So Ian, there we go. It is time to talk about you now.
Look at that.
Yeah, no, I've been doing my homework, mate.
There you go.
So give us a bit of your background and what you do at Genex and how you got hooked up with Kevin.
Sure. And again, as Kevin mentioned right off the start, we really appreciate the opportunity to speak through this type of platform with COVID and all those kind of things. Life's been interesting the last couple of years, but being able to connect basically across the world is pretty cool. So I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate Michelle and Kevin asking me to be a part of this. So I look forward to our discussion tonight. As Peter mentioned, my name is Ian VandenBerg, born and raised in a town setting, but my grandparents milked cows. They sold their dairy in the early 90s, just as I was kind of getting, interested in cows, interested in genetics. And then along came a bunch of other things since then. So you can see my family. I have 2 younger children. Our youngest there, Adele, is 9 months old. Margot, our other daughter, just turned 3. I do enjoy running. Mainly, I was forced into running. My wife was never very athletic in the past, but she decided to pick up running, so she roped me into it. And then I'd like to say, once you get kind of hooked on any kind of activity, whether it be hockey, baseball, whatever it is, once you start doing well, you want to do it more often. So we run quite a bit. If people were on at the start, Kevin joked about some stitches. I did fall on the ice 3 weeks ago and put 6 stitches in the middle of my chin, which was fun. But it's all part of, we don't own a treadmill, so all of our activity is outside. So the other one interesting thing for my family, my wife works at the Toronto Zoo. I'm not sure if people on this call are familiar with the Toronto Zoo. It is probably the most famous, maybe is the right term, for zoos in Toronto or in Canada. There is a Calgary Zoo. There's a couple other little private zoos, but the Toronto Zoo would be the top of the pile in Canada from the zoo perspective. And she works with giraffes. That's her passion. Her conversations at Christmas times and family dinners go a lot further than mine, from a semen and breeding and those kind of discussions. But it's what she's passionate about. It's what she really gets excited about. And we're just essentially a family that loves animals. So my passion for cows, like I said, started young. My exposure to the Jersey breed also started young, under the watchful eye of a gentleman named Barry Little. Meadow Lawn Jerseys is a popular name of the past. Early 2000s, he sold his herd to a herd in Wisconsin. And I used the wrong bull when we first connected, Peter, but the bull that Peter has informed me had the most impact in Australia was Meadow Lawn Bright Spot 60D. And his birth date was 1972. So that was ahead of my time, but the pictures are on the wall, the plaques are on the wall in Barry's house. So I was aware of that bull. And it's just exciting to have been a part of that. You know, Barry, I'm sure people on this call are aware of who Barry Little is. Into his 80s, still actively involved in the Jersey associations in Ontario, the Jersey clubs. So being kind of under his thumb for a couple of years, working on the farm through university, and that then led me to kind of where I am today. I've been in the AI industry for it'll be 15 years this year. The last 10 with Genex, in a role that has been pretty flexible. But my passion really came on early when Genex has always been passionate about being on the leading edge of technology, the leading edge of things that are going to work for our customers, economic focus type discussions. And so we were challenged in 2014 by our customers to find a way to genomic test their females. Genex had committed to the genomic bull kind of wave in the late 2000s, early 2010, 2011. And our customers were saying, if we're selecting bulls based on genomics, we want to be able to genomic test our females. That became a responsibility under my envelope, and it's really blossomed into a real nice product line for us, where it's really been a game changer when you talk about things like accountability, when you talk about things like responsibility, when you talk about things like planning. A lot of times those terms maybe aren't right on the tip of your tongue in the AI business. We make decisions today and don't see those results till 3 years from now when we're selecting bulls. But the genomic side of things is really a passion of mine. Tracking genetics, tracking performance to genetics, and being able to do that through the programs we have available with Genex is really what I'm passionate about. I got a call in the summertime of 2019 from a guy named Kevin Jones, and he was asking me a couple questions. He had spoken with a couple other young Jersey producers that he respects and looks up to, and even a Holstein producer that when he mentioned people at Guelph, there was a fellow he went to at Guelph that I deal with who's a fairly large and progressive Holstein herd in Ontario. And he'd been an early adopter of genomic testing, and Kevin had spoken with him and looked up to him a little bit on how the progression of their farm had been. And it became a very easy discussion for Kevin and I of where do you want to go? How do we get there? What do we have? And what do we have to do differently? And the genomics was the easy discussion at that point. Let's use the genomics. Let's use the DNA. Let's figure out what we have, and let's find a way to make a goal and move forward together. So we've been working together. I guess it'll be 3 years this summer.
Yep. Very good. Very good. Well, we're going to rope you back into this conversation in a little while, Ian, and get some interesting numbers on Kevin's herd. But
yep.
For now, we might just sort of work our way through a bit of history, I think, with Shady Glen Farms, and just because I think the way everything is kind of transformed over time is a really interesting story here. So Kevin, give us a little bit of the early history, I suppose, when you started working with your dad and what it looked like, and we'll work our way through to what it looks like now and some of the changes in thinking that have happened along the way. So
yeah, okay. From taking off from my introduction there, and yeah, so Dad milked about 40 cows in this century-old barn. This picture that you're looking at of the rear end of the cows is the cows were done up for a tour. Jersey, Ontario has a nice annual meeting every year, and wherever the president resides in their club, the annual meeting is in their club, and they do some nice tours and some banquets and production awards and so on. So on this particular day, the picture was taken, everything had been clipped and done up very nicely, very proud. And it almost looks like, sometimes when you look at this picture versus like of our current facility, depending on how the picture was taken, you'd almost wonder, like, did they really make an improvement? But so this barn, it's only like 60 by 100, and there was 40 stalls and there was some pack pens. When Steve and I formed a partnership with Mom and Dad in 2000, called it Shady Glen, and had the goals of expansion so that we could eventually farm together and have our kick at the can. There was 40 stalls. In 2004, we put the stable cleaner back in, the chain that runs around the back end, take the manure away. In 2007 or so, we added more stalls. So we were up to 97 tie stalls. So for those of you that aren't familiar with tie stalls, the cows are tied in there, they're bedded there, they're fed in front, they poop in the gutter. At the top there behind their name cards is the pipeline. One is the vacuum line, one is the pipeline. So we bring the milkers to the cow. And so you can imagine one milker can handle about 4 milkers. And so 90, so many cows, milking was taking like 2.5 hours twice a day. So a fair bit of a labor intensity there. It is very nice to set the cows up, though. It is very nice marketing way of setting the cows up. But anyways, the goal was always to expand and become more efficient. And when we were younger, we went to open houses, free stalls, and so that was our goal. Started doing some research in either free stalls or like a bedded pack idea, and we settled on a 3-row sand bedded free stall barn. So they're free stalls and they're bedded with sand, which is has great benefits. Yeah, okay, so you can see that the cows on the left there are laying down. So there's 3 rows of stalls. There's a scrape alley that takes the manure to the storage, and then the side walls are turkey curtains, they call them. They're adjustable to withstand the climate swings that we have. We go from plus 30, plus 40 in the summertime to minus 30 and minus 40 possibly in the wintertime. So it has to be flexible for both, and all the months that are in between, the shoulder months. So there's a lot to them. We built
back in.
Yep.
Back in these days, Kevin, what did the breeding program look like? What was what did bull selection entail?
So I think my focus when I was through 4-H, I kind of had those goals of creating a show winner, or just at least pretty cows. Like, there was a kind of a mindset through 4-H and even through university that nobody wanted to be milking ugly cows, right? You want to milk pretty cows when you get up in the morning, makes it more fun. So my focus wasn't really on production. Like, I wasn't going for negative production bulls. There are, like, if you really went heavy into show genetics, you can kind of get yourself into minus 1,000 or even more in kilograms of milk on a bull's proof, just to get that kind of look of a cow that you might go for if you want to win a show. So yeah, I wasn't super focused on that. I really like to breed cows from pedigrees that I recognized. I remember telling, I think it wasn't it was Generations. I guess it wasn't Genex, but I remember telling one of the sales guys that I wouldn't use this bull because I didn't recognize the pedigree. It was probably an American pedigree. So that was my thinking, was that I really needed to know, I'd like to know the cow family and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, so that's where I was at that point. So the cows that you're looking at now, they were probably milking somewhere between, on average, 18 to 20, like, so the average of the herd was sort of 18 to 21 kilograms per day in that situation.
Mm-hmm. So we've moved into this lovely new barn, but you didn't have the robots to start with, did you? You
No.
still milking
So
parlor.
yeah, so 2010, we moved in February 2011. The cows, so we were milking we had 74 kilograms of butterfat quota, which allows you to milk a 20-liter cow at 5% fat. So that's one kilogram of quota. We had 74. We brought over like 90 cows or 95 cows, and we soon realized, because of the efficiency and the cow comfort of the barn, just the good air and so on, we realized a 15% increase in production almost instantly. The first pickup went down in liters, but up in kilograms because their fat went higher. But anyways, so we realized the benefits of the barn right away. And that actually enabled us a little bit, or enabled that kind of mindset of not breeding for really focusing on production as much, because we kind of just figured, just with housing and better feeding, that you could increase your profitability just by that. So all you had to do is just do a better job, or in this nicer, newer facility. So for another little while, wasn't really focused on production. Had a couple of talks with some people that started pointing out things like, your herd is outproducing its genetic potential. They would show me the potential of our genetics, and they said, like, you're doing a good job. So they go, you're doing a good job. That's great. You took it as a compliment, but when you look back at it, you're like, they're probably like nicely saying, maybe you should get it in gear a little bit. So yeah, we milked in a parlor. We had a 888. It was a used parlor that we moved from another herd that had retired. So it was 888. And I really liked milking in the parlor. No problems with that. And some people ask me about robots versus parlor, and I think either work, depending on your labor situation. So that was, yeah. So in the bottom left of that picture, I think it's your left, and sometimes this gets turned around, but we had a parlor installed in the one corner of the barn where that straw is, let's say. And so in 2017, we had kind of got to a point where the milking was taking long enough again. The cows were in the holding area for sometimes up to 2 hours to run these cows through. So in the summer times, they were getting a little extra heat stress, and then just not as much time spent eating or laying down. So between that and looking to keep expanding, keep growing the productivity of the barn and our farm as well, it was a bit of a labor challenge. The next step would have been milking 3 times a day, which some of the guys in the area that are do quite well in production would go to 3 times a day. But as a family operation, we just couldn't see that working. So we looked into robots, and we ended up retrofitting the barn and building those 2 rooms. Each of those rooms houses a robot stall. And as you can see in the picture, the transition was, I would say through the transition, we ended up having to call a little heavier for deeper udders on our jerseys than I would have liked to. And that did have an impact on our overall average milk per cow. We got rid of 5 or 8 really heavier milkers. So it took a little while to recover from that. and there's a bit of adjustment period. But all in all, after maybe about a year and a half or so, we got to a point where failures were down to like 1% or less. Milk had returned to its level and maybe even increased a little bit. So the transition was okay.
So along with robots, what about, I mean, you mentioned the other day sand bedding as being a bit of a game changer. Like that for us down here, that's kind of a foreign concept. Just explain to us how that's important to you.
Yeah, so the sand bedding is the gold standard for milk quality in a housing situation. Sand is inorganic, so it doesn't grow bacteria. Like the other choices would be to put a mattress and then put a skiff of sawdust or straw, chopped straw in there to kind of dry things up and to lessen the friction of the cows up and down on a mat. Each year, the companies come out and say they've got the best mattress, the new and improved mattress, but they just don't compare in lying times, in lying behavior, in hawk abrasions that you can get on mattresses. So sand, yeah, is just the best. The research has shown it. The other benefit of it is you can see the alleys they're just concrete. They're grooved concrete, so there's a cement saw that's come through and creates a little channel that's maybe about 1 centimeter wide on a diamond grid, and you can see a little bit of that on the surface. But with the sand, because they're in and out, they track some sand out into the alley, and that adds to the traction of the cows. So our cows, not that they're often running around, but like sometimes you'll have a heifer, a 2-year-old, that'll run from one end to the other, and they don't slip. Whereas if you saw that on a barn that's straw or sawdust, it'd be a little bit slippery and they could just wipe out. So you can imagine that's almost it's a game changer for a cow. And then heat expression is also a benefit. So the only downside of sand is that it will settle to the bottom of our manure storage system. And so then you have to deal with your manure storage, emptying it out in 2 different ways. One, you either mix everything like crazy. So you're mixing like 100 truckloads of sand up with like let's say 1 million gallons of manure, or you pump the liquids off and then you scoop the sand out from the bottom. So that's the only downside of sand, but we really are happy with sand.
And handling the manure doesn't sound like a fun job, but we probably won't go there, I don't think.
No, and actually, yeah, as part of the productivity of this barn has brought new opportunities, and because we had to get the equipment to empty our manure system anyways, we purchased a drag line or a umbilical cord system, like some of you guys might be familiar with, to deal with those liquids. And we ended up getting hired by several other farms as well, so it turned into a bit of a custom work opportunity. And since we were fairly efficient in the barn, we were able to put a few hours in neighbors' farms as well.
Oh, cool. So you described what the breeding program used to look like. Just give us a snapshot of what it looks like now and what your current goals are.
Yeah. So I should go back, because part of the journey started, like I mentioned, Jersey, Ontario, and I was a director on there for a few years. And through that association, we would have production meetings, and a couple of things started to click. We had Neil Smith from American Jersey. We had a fella from Eastern Ontario that was advising us about our heifer numbers, production, return over feed, basically saying like, basically drive for production. Production per cow usually outperforms lower production. So between that, those kind of associations, and then a couple other factors coming into play, we're getting data from these cows at daily milk weights, which we didn't have before in the parlor. We are limited, at least without building more barn, to how many stalls we have available for our cows. We also have just the 2 robots at this time. And so a robot can go up to maybe 60 cows, depending on how you are. But the higher number of cows per robot, it does become more work. So we've got a couple of constraints coming into place that say, maybe, well, definitely head for higher production per cow if you want to keep on increasing your output. And then on the other factor is that with jerseys, at least in our economy, the bull calves are worth very little, like nothing or even a negative amount, depending on how you want to view what you should be doing with Jersey bull calves. And I'll just leave it at that. So our kind of goal was that, and then a lot of people started breeding beef to their dairy animals and crossbreeding them for extra value. So a couple of those factors came into play. And so now our goal is to have zero Jersey bull calves, so we don't have to deal with them. And so, okay, well, you still have to have cows calve. So we aim for 70% now breeding to beef, which we use Angus for our cross. And then 30% of our breedings are sexed Jersey semen. And so then that's where Ian came in. So we had kind of made that decision that we wanted to breed a big portion of cattle to beef and our top animals to Jersey, a sexed Jersey. But how do we decide who gets the Jersey semen? And so we typically historically have type classified and milk recorded. So we had that information, but it still is a little bit cumbersome to figure out who is our top animals. So yeah.
That's a nice little segue to where Ian fits into the scheme of this conversation. So Ian, what are the things that you do for Kevin in this space? How do you help him with his decision making?
So as Kevin outlined, and very similar to how the genomic discussions happens with a lot of the producers I deal with, the initial discussion, there's a little bit of education involved, really just looking at where they want to get to. For Kevin, it was inventory control. So finding ways to ensure that the Jersey calves born on his farm will be genetically superior moving forward, and that we just don't want to have as many Jersey calves as we have had in the past. When you start using sex semen, your world can change really quickly if we don't watch those inventory levels. And we did actually notice that in the first year at Kevin's place, because we just weren't as aggressive as we should have been off the start, because it's new, we're learning, we didn't want to get too far one way. But you see right away the heavy usage of sex semen and maybe not enough beef semen, and our inventory went the wrong way. But in Kevin's situation, the discussion started with inventory, and then decided with finding a simple way to make a genetic plan to move forward and ensuring that that plan was accountable. And we were measurable, and we knew where we were going, and we kept track of it as we moved forward. So that's really where my discussion with Kevin happened. I visited the farm. I showed him some of the work I'd been doing with customers, as I mentioned, since about 2013. And I really just showed the output. So when those cows have calved as 2-year-olds, what does that genetic level look like? And we will get to that later on in our presentation here this evening. But for a guy like Kevin, and for a lot of other people I deal with, that initial meeting usually lays the foundation for the relationship. And if given the opportunity to talk and answer questions and create a plan, That's really where the success of this relationship moves forward. Keeping it accountable, keeping things simple. Kevin needs to be able to go through the paces every day without getting really confused on having to look information up, manage information, that kind of thing. So I do a meeting report for him that I update every 60 days. I use data out of T4C from his Lely, box time, for example. As he mentioned, restrictions to production for him. You've got 2 robots and a certain number of cows. If those cow numbers get up, or if there's certain cows that spend too much time in the robot, there could be a negative impact on efficiency. So I like to include a lot of that information, as well as the genetic information when available. The older cows in his herd, across the industry, they're the cows that typically get assigned to beef right away, but there are a percentage of cows in his herd that are older milking cows, that their performance and their standing within the herd does buy them another dose of Jersey semen.
So
But
you're kind of looking at cow performance. What other things are you adding to the cow performance to determine who's going to get the Jersey semen, who's going to get the beef semen?
So for the cow situation, it's the performance and the genetics. That's the discussion. We do a weighting that's heavy on genetics, but then we factor in that performance to reward those cows that have essentially stood the test of time in his facility. If they're working in that facility, and if some of them have calves with genotype, so we can see some of that transmitting ability. So it makes it really easy to pick who the best ones are, who the ones we want jerseys out of. And with our kind of inventory control in place, we know that moving forward, we will have calves on Shady Glen that are from our superior performers and our superior genetics, which will lay the foundation of our replacement crop in the future. So that for me, where I come in, the analysis of the genetic information we get back on our genotypes, and then the constant in there helping Kevin on the cows that need to be bred in the upcoming period of time, they are identified correctly, and their recommendation of either beef or Jersey is assigned correctly.
So you guys did a nice little presentation at the Jersey Ontario recently, and we've snagged a few slides out of that. Do you want to just walk us through those few slides, please, Ian?
Yes, this is where kind of the passion I have for the genetics, for this whole genomic discussion really comes through. So I hope everyone can see that. This is the first question I usually get asked when we get into the genomics discussion. Someone says, well, I've been ranking my animals on parent average. You know, someone told me that's good enough. And I'm very critical of that discussion, because I've proven to myself to give me the confidence in the discussion, and to people like Kevin and other people I deal with like him, that quite frankly, parent average is not good enough. So what you see here is 4 bars of information. The 2 to the left-hand side are the same group of animals, and the 2 to the right-hand side are the same group of animals. The only difference between the first 2 bars on the left and the bars on the right is the green, the all green column all the way to the left. Those animals have been sorted on parent average net merit. Net merit is the index we use when we really like to focus on economics. As Kevin mentioned, he had discussions and people had said to him, your cows are outperforming their genetics. So I think in Kevin's mind, he thought, hey, I better breed a little bit more milk into these cows. But what he didn't realize at that time was the correlations of some traits when you decide to go heavy milk, especially in Jerseys. Some of that udder depth stuff, daughter fertility becomes heading in the wrong direction when we really select heavily for milk production. So when you talk about parent average, in Kevin's herd, these were the first 49 heifers we ever genotyped for him. On the left-hand side there, you see those animals ranked on parent average. So if I had used this information without any genetic information, those would have been the animals in Kevin's herd that we would have said, those ones we breed sexed Jersey. The third column in the middle, that's all red there, those would be the animals ranked on parent average that in Kevin's situation, we would have said, let's breed these ones beef, because on paper, this is what our parent average tells us. Now, when I re-rank those animals based on genetic value for net merit, the second column in from the left is that same group of animals now re-ranked on their genetic value for net merit. So you can see essentially 63% of the animals we sorted into our top group on parent average didn't belong there. So there's just an example of how highly inaccurate those breeding decisions would have been had we used parent average as our sort function. And then in the same breath, the animals we sorted as on parent average, these ones are our beef breeders. 47% of them would be incorrectly identified if we solely made those decisions off parent average. So this kind of discussion really opens people's eyes to parent average is what it is. But if we really want to start fine-tuning things, if we really want to move forward with a strategy and a plan that we know is going to get us towards that goal, genotyping becomes a very easy discussion point. And in Kevin's situation, I would have shown him that slide the first time we met, and it would have been part of that discussion. Here is why parent average reliability doesn't get me too excited. What I did in this discussion was I used the LPI index. So that's a relatively well-known Canadian index, because this was part of my discussion with Jersey, Ontario. All the way, so there's a graph you can see there with the bars on it. All the way to the left-hand side, you see PA as a calf. That represents parent average as a calf. So essentially the reliability of that animal's genetics. Parent average of a Jersey calf in Canada on LPI is 30%. Now, Kevin mentioned some of the other tools, and I'm a big proponent of tools in our toolbox to make decisions. So when you talk about what those tools are immediately available and historically usable, you look at classification and milk reporting. Well, if you only have parent average on that calf, 2 years from now, she's going to calve in, she's going to get classified in her first lactation. She'll probably get milk tested 6 or 7 times, and we will gain about 12 to 15% reliability. So we will go from 30 to about, let's call it 45, which is that second bar graph. Now skip ahead another 3 years. That cow is now 5 years old. She's probably been classified potentially up to 4 times. She's been milk tested probably over 20 times. We gain again another jump in reliability on that animal's genetics, but that really only gets us to about 55%. So we have a 5-year-old animal that has been classified multiple times. She's been milk recorded over multiple lactations, but her reliability, so her ability for us to use her genetic information to make decisions, is now exactly the same as that calf we can genotype at 3 months of age. So that middle bar is reliability of an index value based on genotype. So from parent average right there to our next bar is our genomic reliability as a calf. So we've just gained 5 years of reliability building. And we know that information when that calf's 3 months old. Then moving forward, we can add those other tools again. We can classify that cow and milk tester as a 2-year-old. We can classify her and milk tester later in life as a 5-year-old cow, but we really only again have small gains in that reliability. So the discussion about strategic breeding, the discussion about inventory control, the discussion in Kevin's situation about which cows do we breed beef, which cows do we breed Jersey for the future of my herd. This graph really kind of shows that our highest return, our tool that's going to give us the highest accuracy is right there, genotype as a calf. Then we make those decisions right away, and the rest takes care of itself.
So the next question is, does it work?
Yeah, and I like that question too. This is something I do for all the herds I work with. We go back, I essentially ask them to trust me for the first 2 years. We talk about it, we educate, we discuss a lot of things. Kevin and I had multiple meetings, every 3-4 months I'd be at the farm. We'd talk through things. Oftentimes he would ask me something like, and we're sure we're on the right track, right? This is the plan. And I would reassure him that yes, he is different, but similar to a lot of the customers I work with. And the track record is proven. The experience is there. I ask him to trust me, and I know that I'm going to prove myself. So here you have the first 26 animals that calved in their first lactation that we had genotyped. And here, when all I do in this situation is I pull their performance data out of his robots, and then whatever I needed, somatic cells specifically, sometimes from his lactanet or his milk recording, but I can get all the information I need out of his robot. And then all I do is I use the index value we'd selected, net merit, as our guide. And I just split this group of 26 animals, 13 as my top 50% and 13 as my bottom, based on that genomic net merit number. And then you can see, as you work your way across, the differences. So there's about 225 points difference in overall index. When you look at their milk proof, so essentially, if you were to read a bull proof, the females is the same. There's over 500 points different in their transmitting ability for milk production. What does that look like? It's a 670 kilo difference in their 305 projection, right in the middle of that graph, 83.24 versus 76.54. What does that look like on a daily basis? 29.2 versus 27.4. And someone might say to me, well, what if my bottom ones make more components? Well, using the net merit index, we factor in it's heavily weighted on fat and protein. So, in this herd, we're getting more kilos per day of lactation. I would call it arguably at the same component level. There is a little bit of an adjustment, a positive adjustment for a high genetic group, but everything aside, this is proving to me that our top 50% or our superior genetic animals are indeed our top performers. And for Kevin, I hope this gives him some confidence and some reassurance. I know he sees it and he's told me that, but until we put it on paper, that is when I spoke early on about the accountability. It really is something that's a passion of mine that hasn't really been a popular word in the AI industry, but it's come to the point with genetics and genomic testing and performance data that we really need to, as partners on the farm, prove back that the program is working. And that's what helps solidify our long-term relationship between myself and a guy like Kevin.
Excellent. No, that's great. Thanks, Ian. So, I mean, guys, this is probably for both of you because you're both involved in this space, but this change in thinking, this change in the structure of the breeding program, and Kevin alluded to this a little earlier, has kind of thrown up some challenges, challenges around, what you guys refer to as your heifer inventory and that sort of thing, but also voluntary culling versus involuntary culling and those sorts of things because of the volume of replacements we've got. So can you elaborate on that a little bit, because it's a different paradigm to where you were back 20 years ago, where every heifer was precious and you had to keep them and that sort of thing. It's a different way of thinking now. So tell us how that looks.
Yeah, like growing up, when you had a heifer calf, everybody celebrated, right? But there was some leftover excitement over some export markets that we used to have in the past, when our dollar was lower relative to the Americans' dollar. So there was a lot of heifers, excess heifers, were going to the States or Mexico. So it was viewed as a income generating thing to have extra heifers. Plus, you didn't really have the tools like you do now with sex semen. So two factors that have changed. There isn't as much excitement about export animals to the States. They seem to have enough. The dollar has changed to make that less economical. And and feed costs and all that kind of stuff, pressures have caught up to make a lot of people realize that, yeah, anywhere from arguably 2,200 Canadian to $3,000 to raise a heifer to the 2-year-old mark. So, and we kind of struggle for average animals, fresh cows. I mean, that wanes a little bit, but it's probably only 1 year and 5 that you're going to get return on that investment. So it's not really an economical advantage to raise more heifers than you absolutely need, within reason, I guess. And then, yeah, with sex semen, that certainly compounded that, because a lot of people and we did too, we misused it. And so last year in 2021, we actually registered 60 heifers, and that was with the guidance that we were on, but we had more of a 50-50 aim for beef and jerseys, which then produced us quite a few heifers. So our culling rate is something in the neighborhood. So our involuntary cull rate, the ones that we absolutely had to get rid of or died, was 13 animals. 13 animals, or 13%, is pretty much the same at 100 cow herd. So, and then, so actually 13% is what that was. And then our voluntary culls was 31%. Now that's arguable, because sometimes if you just have extra heifers, you have to push on the next worst animal to make room for that. So I think if we truly looked at how many replacements we really need, we'd be somewhere in that 30, maybe 35 replacements, 30 to 35. There's a trade-off there. You still want to bring on your new genetics. And so we're kind of torn right now whether we want to actually reduce our culling rate or keep it the same, or even increase it to bring on some of that new genetics. Like, for instance, you saw our genotype results from 2.5 years ago, and it was pretty rangy, really, to be honest. We had some plus 200 net merits, but I think we had more in the negatives than we would have in the positives. The last results that we came back with, there was 1 plus 500. Not that wasn't our average, but it's significantly improved. So I'm excited to see those animals come through. So our culling rate might be a little bit atypical over the next year or two, but we do have to calve out and deal with those 60 extra. Well, it's not 60 extra. It's about 30 extra animals this coming year. But actually our projected pregnancies are more in line with our current goals, which would get us somewhere in that 35 to 40 heifers on the ground, and then the rest beef. Ends up to be about 100 pregnancies to beef. So I'm glad I've got a market right now. It's not a matter of finding a market now. It's a matter of which guy gets them. So you actually have a bit of a list, or like a waiting list on animals now. So it's just a good position to be in, rather than having to deal with almost like a waste product of the extra calves.
And of course, they're all sired by Genex Angus bulls, aren't they?
Yeah. No, actually, we have very good service in our area for, whether it's veterinarian or nutrition and genetic advisors. Right now, our Angus semen is coming from Alta for most part. But yeah, when Ian does bull sort, he includes all companies on that bull sort, which is very nice of him. Typically, actually, when the first bull sorts came out, different companies, they just put their own, and that was hard because you're flipping back from this guy's to that guy's, and that made it just too much time spent in breeding decisions. So, but it is, I should say, the program now, when we're only aiming at 30% of the pregnancies being Jersey, you're breeding a lot of animals that you really admire and like to beef, and you're putting an end to that. Like, it's not like before where it was conventional semen that you're like, well, it might be a heifer, might be a bull. You are dead ending that genetics right there, which is a good thing and a bad thing, right? It's a good thing for those bottom third, for sure, because like we can identify older cows, older genetics in our herd that are definitely ones I want to dead end. But there's a middle group there that you're like, well, it's hard to put Angus into those when you're passionate about it. But anyways, to get our replacements from the top 30% and double that with like, so now we're going to be putting on the top 30 of those ones that are testing like high net merit, like high index. Now we're just going to speed up our genetic progress by a fair bit. I remember just before kind of getting into this mindset, I looked into, we never did flush any cows for ET work, but I did look into flushing, into the cost of flushing. We had a pretty good GLPI cow, our highest cow, and I looked into the cost of that, and it was going to be about $1,000, I guess, by the time you got some eggs out of her. And well, there's a lot of chances between that and getting some return off that money, whereas this was very like relatively cheap. And I made the sales argument for genotyping, and I'll divert here and amuse that yeah, we pay about $45, $50 for a genotype on each heifer, but we're only paying $10 or $15 on the Angus semen if it's conventional. Now we do use some sexed male Angus, but then we're only paying we're paying $50 to $70 on Jersey sex semen. So the average cost of our breeding program is probably no different than it was on conventional semen. So all in all, and that was a serious drawback to genotyping, was that $50. I couldn't get my head around that, but I think all in all, we're heading in the right direction. It's exciting to see. And just imagine, right now our top cow milking she's making 50 liters, but she's by a bull called Excitation, which is really pretty cows off of Excitation. It's a bride-on bull, Ontario bred, and taking nothing away from his genetic potential, but he's a minus milk bull now. And so if he's our top milk, our top milk cow is off of this bull. Can you imagine when we have these plus hundreds of milk on average of our young stock, where we're going to be in a year or two, meeting our goals, hopefully.
So anything particular about the beef bulls you use, apart from their Angus? Is there anything that you look at, or? Yeah,
at first the Angus was picked because it seemed to make or erase the Jersey the best, because limo would be somewhat brown as well, right? But Angus have typically been the chosen one, calving ease, and I'm hoping that my genetic advisors are selling us Angus bulls that are smaller calving, less gestation days, all those kind of nice things. That is the main goal for us, because yeah, if you ruin a cow, well, then you got yourself backwards, right? So you're working yourself backwards. So you don't want any extra harder calvings. I think they are a little bit harder on the especially the younger ones, but not significantly. So just wrapping up, can you just give us a little bit of an insight into the robots? We're getting down in Australia, we're getting a few more robots around the place. I mean, obviously we have other challenges in terms of integrating robots into our management system because our cows are out grazing. But what have you seen has been the real advantages of the robots in your system? Yeah, and I'm going to sound like a robot salesman to tell you all the positives, because I'm actually glad I didn't get any robot calls during this meeting, because sometimes you get a night call through the night, and you have to come out, and it might be just as simple as one of those teat liners pulled off or something like that, or it could be as serious as the vacuum pump needs cleaning that night, like right away. So sometimes you dread hearing the phone through the night or at a hockey game or something like that. So there's some drawbacks to them. I mean, when they need fixed right away. And we have a really good service provider from Lilly they are a couple hours away, but they're really good at preventative maintenance and so on, and they have good support. So and that support is on just a phone call away, 24 hours a day. So they are good that way. Have been supportive. But the benefits to the robotic system, I think probably right off the bat we saw, just because they have the collar, they have the SCR
SCR.
collars. Yeah. We just actually changed them to the new ones, but they have activity meters. So our breeding, we were typically using like an OVSync or Cedar Sync program prior in the parlor, and or just natural observations of heats. But now with the activity, it's very, very rare, unless we have a cow go inovular, that we have to use any drugs, any reproductive drugs. So that's been a real benefit. And I suppose you don't have to have robots to have those collars now, but that's when we got them, so they instantly saw that. The other thing is their consistent teat prep and milking, like that brush that you see in the middle of the screen, it goes out when the cow comes in, and it brushes the teats with the disinfectant on it, and then it sprays air up at the teat to kind of dry it off. And we've got it set that the stimulation, I think, it's up to 90 seconds, I think, from the start, from when the cow goes in to when the cups actually get on. And so it's doing that like consistently every day. So that, like, our somatic cell has actually gone down since the parlor. So I can't argue with the data. We were probably 175 to 225. I guess that would be an average of 200 if you did the math, but we were probably in that in that range in the parlor. And right now I think we're kind of like 75 to 100 somatic cell. So it has improved milk quality. What's the other? I mean, labor obviously gets talked about. So I'd say labor got flexible, and for myself, I don't think I spend less time in the barn, but it's a bit more flexible. And then, like I said before, when we are busy in the fields, I can continue out there helping my brother with the field work until 7 or 8 in the evening. And if one of the kids can go in and just make sure nobody's, trying to jump over a gate or anything, and things are clean and the stalls are maintained. So it's been a little bit flexible that way, but and we are still managing to keep her all going without Dad. So I mean, we didn't put it in because he was sick or anything. It actually happened a year or two before he got sick, but it was lucky that we had done that ahead of that, because we were able to compensate, I guess. So I would say I've covered the advantages of the robot through that. I mean, we do get an extra, theoretically, we get an extra milking on there. So our average milkings are about 2.8 or 2.9 milkings per cow per day. Our heavy hitters are getting milked 4.5 times a day. And then some of the drier ones, there'd only be 1.8 or 2. So yeah. Oh, and space, actually, they kind of fit in. And we had another benefit of it was we took the area that was in the parlor and we were able to add more calving space and transition cow space. So that was an extra benefit. I think you can fit robots in smaller spaces than you can with the typical parlor and holding area system.
Cool. Well, thank you for that. I mean, that's guys, we've gone a little bit longer than we were planning, but I think that's been really, really good and really insightful, and given us another look at how different people are using genomics in their different systems. And I think that's when we set out on this bit of a journey around international insights. It was really one of the key goals of ours, was to try and see how people were using genomics and adapting them to their systems, and some of the different challenges that throws up, and and the way that you've handled those challenges. And I think that's been excellent. And so thank you for your time and your input and all the background work that you've done. We've really appreciated it from our end. I've just noticed there wasn't any before, but there's a couple of little questions. So from Majid, there we go. Is sex semen available from the very top bulls, and is it pricey in terms of being used on commercial farms?
I just say that, yeah, when Ian does my bull sort, my first texts or calls to my AI suppliers is this bull available? Because sometimes they've kind of been yanked from, they're brand new. And so a lot of times the sales guys don't even know about them just yet. They're definitely not on their proof sheet. And is he sexed? Because that's the two criteria. I mean, obviously if they're available and we have to have it sexed. That has narrowed it down to like, sometimes they aren't sexed, but I think all the providers now are like, at least with jerseys, saying to their top guys, like, it just has to be sexed. There's just no other way. So Ian, would you say that we're limited to when we're using sexed, we're missing out on some bulls?
I don't believe we are. I know from a Genex perspective, and I think just from an industry perspective, especially in the Jersey breed, because of where the bull calf market is for jerseys in Canada and the US, most AI companies have understood that and are looking at ensuring that bulls that they're releasing are available in sex semen, because that is what the market is demanding. So I get very nervous when I see us bringing up a bunch of conventional semen specifically on a Jersey bull, because we just don't. A lot more guys are looking at what Kevin's doing and trying to focus on that, and the sex semen becomes the necessity at that point. And I think it's gotten quite a bit better in the last couple of years. That I typically, when I run a bull sort for Kevin, there might be 30 bulls on the list, and he only just has to find 2 or 3. The bulls fit into a range. There was a question that came to me specifically on my chat. I don't know if you're able to see that one, Peter. I can answer that here. The question was, does Kevin use breed indexes, i.e. net merit, as a great sort for his bulls rather than starting with selecting AI bulls and individual traits? And that's exactly what we do. We started with net merit. We have 3 minimums, I'll call them. We put in a minimum value for net merit, and that's just strictly based off of what his female's results come back like, because we always want to see them moving forward. We put a minimum in for milk, because I want to protect a little bit on production. And then we put a minimum in for DPR, which is daughter pregnancy rate. So that factor of fertility, because that was something we'd recognized when Kevin had gone extreme on the production focus, let's say 5 years ago or so, we'd really lost some of that health and fertility that we can breed back into the cows. And when you get into the discussion of public perception of animal agriculture and animal welfare, and what Kevin just mentioned about drugs and hormones, if we can get away from using those words and breed for those things, those are the 3 limiters, or the 3 minimums I put in before I do any other sorting on bulls for Kevin. There is some adjustment made on bulls specifically for a robot scenario. So we're going to look at placements, we're going to look at teat length, we're going to look at milking speed. But the kind of the 4 main things, or the 3 main things we start with, is going to be index with being net merit. It's going to be a minimum for milk, and it's going to be a minimum DPR, so that we don't see bulls that fall below those minimums.
That's great. So guys, again, thank you. Have you got any, Ian, Kevin, you got any parting thoughts, final words before we wrap this up?
Can I throw another question out there?
No.
That's fair. The question I wanted to ask you, I see a lot of herds that are in a similar situation to what Kevin has this year, where they have a ton of heifers coming. And a lot of those herds have kind of fixed that for the future. But for those herds that have a lot of heifers coming, and those heifers are very ideal genetically, do you think it's worth actually hanging on to those genetics and kind of getting rid of some of that better production from your older cows and maybe taking a lag for a year or two? Or do you think that that's worth doing, or do you think that that's not worth doing?
Who do you want to answer that one first? You're Kevin.
Ian, you go first.
Me first. I'm okay with, in a situation where there's opportunity to cull cows we can cull, I'm okay with doing that if we know there's heifers to replace them. So if we've got genetics that we know are part of the plan, if we are filling quota and we're filling production needs for the farm, finding a way to let those cows that potentially could cause us frustrations. Part of this whole system and whole plan we've got in place is to keep it simple and to try to make things more simple for a guy like Kevin or the customers they deal with. And part of that sometimes is parting ways with cows that, yes, they'll make a lot of milk. Yes, they tick a lot of boxes, but if we know the genetics are coming along, if we know we can handle, maybe 40% first lactation, 45% first lactation in the herd, from a production perspective, I have no issue parting ways, essentially with cows in Kevin's situation, that I was going to breed beef anyways.
My one parting thought there, Peter, was that we kind of glazed over it. We kind of jumped over the fact that one of the barriers, or one of the first things that uses of genomics, people were, and we're talking about extra heifers, surplus extra heifers, was that you genomically test your heifers, and then you get rid of, like, if you had 10 heifers, you only needed 7, you'd get rid of the bottom 3. Where we jumped to was that, like, and the market for those in our area, for an open Jersey heifer was not going to make it even worth having her even born to start with. So we jumped to just controlling it at the breeding decision, at the breeding level. And the other thing, to Tristan's point, was that it'd be super if we could, like, if we have a bunch of high merit heifers, a surplus, it'd be nice to be able to sell them. But I don't think the indexed heifers in Canada have caught up, have increased in value enough based on their genetic potential as much as in other countries. I see some of the sale prices in Australia, they seem to really favor some of the the higher indexed animals, and we haven't caught up. It's really not something anybody's looking for at this point in the marketing that I know of. They pretty much have to be fresh to market them.
And there's an additional cost with getting them to that point, isn't there?
Yeah, and arguably not economical.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, you still want to buffer yourself. You don't want to end up short, because then I think it'd be worse to have to start buying in animals because you were too skinny on your heifer raising, because then you would be open to some disease transfer. So we are trying to keep a closed herd, which is priority. So we'll buffer it by a few percent. Things don't always go perfectly. Sometimes you just have a bad month, or how things go when you have livestock.
That's it. All right, guys, we might wrap it up there. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This has really been a great discussion today, and our first three-way discussion. I think we got through it unscathed, which is really good. I really appreciate your time, Kevin and Ian. Yeah, it's you'll be able to see yourselves on YouTube very shortly. So thanks again, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day or the rest of their evening, depending on where you are.
Well, thank you, and you're doing a great job on extension work down there. So keep it up. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I agree with Kevin. The extension work that we've kind of been a part of the last little while, some of the other things that have come out of Australia. I think I texted Kevin a year and a half ago when we got onto a conference.
Herd 21
stuff. Yeah, I think I texted Kevin. It feels like Australia is ahead of where we are. from that perspective. So the extension work, the education work, you guys are doing a good job.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.